Afternoon, good morning, good evening to you all wherever you are. My name is Christophe Bourillon and I'm the new CEO of the Professional Yachting Association. It is my pleasure, it really is my pleasure to welcome you all to our first webinar of the year on a very pressing, on a very important topic, the impact of Brexit and its regulations on yacht crew. I have the feeling that there are many of us, but allow me to hand over the floor to my colleague Stacey Sutar from the PYA office, who organized this webinar and who will be moderating the event. Stacey, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you, Christophe. Thank you to everyone who's dialing in. I can see we've got quite a few participants who've already joined us today. Already over 105 people have joined, so thank you to everyone who's joined in. Just for anybody who doesn't know me, who hasn't seen me on previous webinars, my name is Stacey Sutar and I'm the communications manager at the PYA. And just to give everyone a little bit of a background about the PYA. So if you haven't heard of us, we're the Professional Yachting Association. We're a not-for-profit organization and we exist primarily to represent the interests of professional yacht crew around the world. So we do have a physical office in Antibes in France, and our office team is available for people who want to come into the office for walk-in visits. Obviously with the coronavirus restrictions at the moment, we're not accepting walk-in visits, but our office is open and our team is working. So if you have a question, you can email us or pick up the phone and give us a call. This year is a very special year for the PYA. It's been 30 years that the PYA has been active as an organization. So, it's really special to us that, we've been around for this long and we're still helping yacht crew worldwide. Just in terms of the services that we offer, we've been appointed by the MCA to verify sea service on behalf of crew. And we now issue a digital service record book to crew whose sea service we verify. Our full-time staff and the office help our members with a range of different issues. This includes providing accurate, unbiased, one-to-one advice on certification, training, welfare, and regulations that yacht crew have to abide by. In addition to the sea service verification, which is one of our core services, our team also helps with crew who are submitting applications for NOEs, revalidations, and COCs to the MCA, so we can assist crew with that. We also offer yacht rating certificates, and last but not least, we have a legal defense insurance as part of our membership package. So whilst we're happy to answer questions when crew pick up the phone and give us a call, we do operate on a membership basis. So if you do want to take use of one of our services, we advise you to sign up as a member. You can do that via our website, or if you want to give us a call and sign up that way, that's okay as well. For everyone who's dialed into the webinar today, we're offering a very special 20% membership discount, and you can do that, you can take advantage of that by going on our website and signing up using the code WEB20, so that's one word, WEB20, or just give us a call, and if you quote that special webinar code, you'll get a 20% discount on your membership. So that's for all new memberships and for any existing members who want to take up a multiple year membership. So before I bore everyone with too many details, I am just going to share my screen and show everyone our schedule for the day, and then also just introduce you to all of our panelists. So I will just share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see the schedule nice and clearly now. So our first panelist that will run through the Brexit regulations for crew in primarily in France and Monaco is Mark Ravnholt from Catalano Shipping Services. They're a local yacht agency here. And I believe, Mark, you've also got offices in Italy and in Corsica and throughout France.
Yes.
So after Mark, we're going to be having some of the Brexit regulations for crew, specifically focusing on Spain. is Antonella, Della, Pietra from BWA Yachting in Spain.
Yes, thank you.
And then last but not least, covering UK certificates and the acceptance of certification after Brexit is Richard Falk from the RYA in the UK. Perfect. And then really, really importantly, I know a lot of people have sent us questions, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions about your individual situations. Feel free to submit your questions in the chat. I will be collating those questions, and we're going to be running through the questions one by one at the end. So yeah, please feel free just to pop those questions in the chat box and we'll address them at the end. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now and officially hand over to our first panelist, Mark from Catalano Shipping. So Mark, can you just tell us a little bit, I mean, before I jump into you, Mark, I know there was, I do have one slide that I just wanted to go through. So sorry, just to jump back to myself there. Just looking at a Brexit from a sort of really broad point of view, as everyone knows, the UK left the EU on the 31st of December 2020. So we're officially not part of the EU, the UK. If you're a UK citizen, you can now only stay in the EU unless you've got a visa or residency in the EU. You can only stay in the EU for tourist purposes for 90 days within a 180-day period. So that started on the 1st of January. So if you were already in the EU, you know, that time clock has already started ticking from the 1st of January. So you've got 90 days on your official tourist status. So obviously we'll get Mark and Antonella to clarify the details behind all of that. But broadly, that is, you know, what the time limit that UK citizens are allowed in the EU. Really importantly, if you don't know this already, as a UK citizen, you will now need to travel with your passport and get stamped into the EU and out of the EU every time you visit one of the member states within the EU. In order to do that, your passport needs to be no older than 10 years, and it needs to have at least 6 months left before it expires. I've spoken to one of our PYA council members. He's also a captain. He's a British citizen, and he works in, he lives in France. And he told me he's been speaking with immigration lawyers, and that crew need to be aware that although a lot of crew come to the EU and they're on a tourist visa and they look for work, and then once they found work, they get stamped out on their boat. Technically, looking for work while you are on that tourist status is on the edge of the law. So again, it's something we will cover during the webinar. And then lastly, really importantly, is although the immigration status for the whole EU should technically be the same, so all the rules and regulations that we discussed today should be the same for every EU country. What we have found, and we've received lots of questions from our members, is that lots of different countries and ports have slightly different variations and are accepting slightly different documentation. So this is why it's really important that we're having this webinar today to iron out some of the sort of minor technicalities. And you know, we would really advise crew during this phase, if you do have any immigration questions or issues, that you should work very closely with your local yachting agent, because they are going to be your best you know, advisor during this process. So if you want to find out more information, specifically if you're a UK citizen, about the rules that apply to you, you can visit the UK website, which is the government website, which is www.gov.uk/visit-Europe-1-January-2021. So that's the broad situation. I'm going to hand over to Mark now to clarify all these details.
Thank you very much, Stacey, and thanks for all of you participants to listening in. Yes, indeed, there is a problem now with the UK seafarers, of course, but it's not really a problem because we've had that situation with many other nationalities for years already. So South Africans, of course, are subject to visa. US citizens or Australians were never subject to visa, and therefore they are same category as the UK citizens are right now. It's, of course, a situation that's new because some of you may already have entered the EU before the 31st of December, and therefore you're in a situation where you did not get stamped in. And then how do you manage the getting stamped out? In France, Monaco, and it should be more or less the same, I guess, everywhere. As Stacey said, there can be different local regulations, but when you do not have a stamp in, you cannot get the stamp out. Those having arrived before the 31st of December are supposed to have a status of saying you are now from 1st of January allowed to have 90 days ticking, which means you must stamp out or leave before the 31st of March 2021. In order to be stamped out, you should, of course, prove that you are a seafarer, otherwise any odd tourist could be stamped out, and therefore you must hold a seaman book. A seaman book or a discharge book, or in many cases, I mean, whatever proof you can have of being a seafarer will work, and especially if, of course, you go through an agent that has a regular contact with immigrations, we can always speak to them and find out what can we do in this particular case in case you do not yet have a seaman book. I understand from Stacey that the UK is having a lot of requests and therefore can't treat everything and everybody in due time, also because of the COVID situation, of course, less people working. Now, what is important to understand, of course, is since the UK nationals never had the situation before, they may not understand what are the limitations. The limitation when you're stamped out is that you cannot travel freely as you could prior when you were an EU citizen, just walking around EU or Schengen, wherever you went. So when you enter Schengen and you get stamped out of Schengen, while the boat still circulates inside Schengen, you are set to be covered by your seaman book. That means you can only circulate in the port of call and the touching neighboring towns within the same country. It's important to see there's a limitation of how far you can go, and therefore you must monitor once you're on board the boat, of course, what are your obligations to travel, especially during the winter time when people, I mean, right now it's impossible, but in Antibes, Cannes, Monaco area, we've got a lot of people during the winter going to the ski stations, and of course, that is much further off than the next town of the port of call. And therefore, you should always stamped or remain stamped into Schengen while you have traveling, and then just stamped out when you don't need them the days anymore or need to go somewhere anymore. It's easy to be stamped out, of course. You just have to request the stamp by immigration. You can do it in some immigration points on your own. You can do it only by an agent in some other immigration points. Some immigration points will ask you for 5 days notice, which is a legal notice time, and some can do it even same day. Once you are stamped out, and of course, if you then choose to go beyond the limitation of what you can in terms of travel, just bear in mind that an insurance could say, if you had an accident, God forbid, someone running into your car, we don't cover because you were not supposed to be circulating where you are right now. What are the risks of not getting stamped out, overstaying? It's different from country to country. It's not Schengen settled. It is each country that determines what risk and what penalty you will have. I can only say that for France, it's up to 1 year imprisonment and 3,750 euros fine. Not that I've seen any over the last years, simply because, well, when there's a problem, we can speak to the guys. The major risk in the past that has been is not normal seafarers. It's when you have been taking work shoreside, which of course is not valid without a work visa. In Germany, there's a criminal offense of up to 1 year's imprisonment and 30 euros per day fine for the first month, and thereafter you can get fined up to 3,000 euros. In the Netherlands, you have from 1 to 10 years or 20 years even period where you can't enter the country anymore. Greece, you have a minimum fine of 500 euros. You got 1,200 for between 30 and 90 days overstay. and above 90 days, it's 1,500 euros fine. Why do I speak about the different countries if I should only talk about France, Monaco? Because when you disembark and you travel back home, it may not be France, Monaco that controls your exit from Schengen. It is the last airport. So if you have a flight from Nice airport to Amsterdam and then to South Africa or whatever you go on holidays, if you go on holidays, or just back to the UK, then it's the last airport that controls you, that also give you the fine, because that's when you have your passport controlled. You don't have your passport controlled when you embark Nice to take a flight to Dublin, to Amsterdam, or whatever you want to fly first. Therefore, it's important to find out what is your risk where you go somewhere else, and also bear in mind that when you get fined, it is immediate payment on spot. Monaco is not Schengen, but Monaco follows the Schengen rules, and it's all determined by the French administration, which means, of course, that we have to go through the Menton border control to do all the Schengen formalities for boats in Monaco. Now, if you arrive before the 31st and you need to leave, of the 31st of December, and you need to leave, then you just get permission to go to the airport because you're in your 90 days period, and then you get stamped out in the airport. If you arrived after the 31st of December, then of course you had an entry stamp in your passport already, and then you just need to get stamped out when you either need to stop the days from ticking when you embark the boat, or when you leave again, should you only stay a month, for example, on board the boat. If you leave after the 31st of March, then you need to make sure that you had your formalities done before, and you can get stamped in, of course, when you disembark the boat, to make sure that you can travel over land to go to the airport. It is important that you have that stamp in, so that you're not accused for having overstayed. Yeah, what else? I think that's it. Yeah, the only thing that I can add for the moment, at least for France, Monaco, is that I can't stamp you in currently without you showing a ticket to leave Schengen. That is purely a COVID regulation. We do not want to have non-EU Schengen nationals circulating in France, spreading the COVID. That's why.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. I think what's really important that you said then, I think a lot of crew really need to take this seriously, is that there are serious fines if you're not aware of your immigration status and you overstay. So really, we urge all crew, please make sure that you take this seriously and you're aware of what your immigration status is now that the UK has officially left the EU. We obviously will come back to you, Mark, with some of the specific questions that are asked in the chat at the end of the webinar. But I will move on very swiftly over to Antonella in Spain. So Antonella from BWA Yachting. Antonella, I know you prepared a presentation for today, so I'm just going to share my screen so that you can read through that.
Thank you.
There we go. Hopefully you can see that clearly now.
Yes, for me it's perfect. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you again to BYA, to you, and to Christoph and the other panelists for inviting us. As explained before, we don't repeat the same things that we've been repeating previously. The Schengen zone is the same. The regulation applied pretty much, with some exception that I'll clarify later, to all the different Schengen countries. You've been so kind to mention some specific question that we've we'd be ready to answer now. And basically was the implication for crew members coming from the UK into Spain at the moment. So focusing specifically on this topic. We mentioned before the stamping out, the period. There is a slight difference from Spain that I would like to mention and highlight, because I saw that Mark mentioned that for France and Monaco, automatically from January 1st, the British crew member are taking their time and they have only 90 days. So March, they should be leaving. Well, that's not, and it's really an important topic, that's not the case for Spain. And I think that will clarify and how do you say, put at peace lots of crew members, because for Spain, if you have entered prior to January 1st and you have not obtained a stamp of entry, you're not officially and legally enter. So you do not have a stamp. It means you're not counting, your days are not ticking. That's very important, because obviously we did receive a lot of phone calls and a lot of worry, crew members wanting to be stamped out. What is similar to Monaco and France for sure is that we can't stamp you out if you don't have a stamp of entry, right? So the process, sorry if I'm touching this topic, Stacey, but I thought it was very important, so there is no panic mode for crew member.
Definitely, it's one of the sort of key questions that we keep
exactly.
The stamping in and stamping out process is being, I think, particularly confusing for a lot of people.
Yes. And we've been receiving official confirmation from both the main hub for Spain for yachting are Barcelona and Mallorca, and both immigration offices have confirmed that it's not ticking the time from January 1st automatically. It's only ticking when you get a stamp of entry, if it makes sense. So basically, every crew member, every British crew member that was on board a yacht that is currently in Spain is not considered overstay after March 31st, basically, right? And everything else that Mark mentioned very, very clearly applies, meaning that we can stamp in entry only if they are departing. So we have to present a flight, confirmed flight details for their departure. They cannot just get a stamp of entry for tourism reason. So that for sure, especially now during COVID, obviously it's incredibly important to have clear. But I thought it was really important to clarify that for us in Spain, your time is not ticking if you're not entered after January 1st. So yeah, January 1st. And so thank you so much, and sorry for for deviating a little bit the topic. Now going back to the implication of British crew member coming into Spain, effectively from December 22nd, the Spanish government, as long as many other European countries, have toughened the restriction and imposed a ban on direct flight coming from the UK and British citizens coming from the UK, even if they were not coming directly into Spain. And at that point, there was no exemption like happened in the past. And only if you were a Spanish citizen or legal resident or Gibraltar resident, you could come into Spain, no other exemption until January 1st. When they basically finally realized that was a very tough restriction to impose, especially on essential workers like seafarers and flying crew. So at that point, on January 1st, on the official BOE, 2021, number one, it was confirmed that there was going to be an extension of that restriction until January 19th. But finally, crew members, seafarers, specifically professional seafarers, would be exempt from this exemption. So we managed to support many crew members successfully. They came through either directly into Spain, or with connecting flight through Holland, mainly through Holland to Germany. Those were the most common routes that they followed. So that was obviously a very important achievement for us in Spain, because it created a lot of panic at the beginning. In the toughest time, where restriction still allows seafarer to come into Spain, the seafarer actually managed to have also an exemption on PCR testing, so they were not an obligation to present one. We always obviously suggested, where possible, to be socially responsible and to have a test before coming in, but was not a compulsory requirement. At this time, that initial exemption is not being eliminated as such, so it's still in place, but we strongly advise to take tests before coming. Again, we had cases where, with our travel letters and presenting copy of the announcement, the official announcement, we managed to get crew member without a test, because for some reason they were unable to obtain one, or the flight had been cancelled and the tests were no longer valid. So in that circumstance as well, we managed to make them come true. But again, we strongly advise everybody to have a negative PCR test when you're coming in. That topic was related to the travel restriction for UK citizen. Going back again, we were just asked to, I don't want to repeat myself, because Mark has been so clear. We were asked as well to go through the stamping process in and out the Spanish port. I reconfirm that everything that Mark mentioned applies to Spain again. When we have to organize stamping in and out, obviously require certain documentation. It's highlighted in the presentation. Here in Spain, almost in every port, you need to have an appointed agent to represent you, to request the stamping in and out. Generally speaking, they are quite precise, and the timing, it's restricted to morning time, so 8:30 from 2 o'clock. Occasionally, if we can prove exceptional circumstances, then we can stamp also over the weekend. So we always ask crew to be as attentive as possible, and give us a minimum notice of 24 hours. We organize daily immigration runs, so can always accommodate a crew member to join us. But obviously, the most notice we receive, the better for everyone. Documentation that is required. Normally, we are dealing with clients, so we already have on file their details, so we don't have to submit it or request it every time. But if it's a new client joining us or requesting the service, then we obviously require a certificate of registry, their passport, their Siemens book. Again, here an important note. Nowadays, almost all the crew is obviously professional crew and have their Siemens book. But if they don't have it, they can if they come with us, it's clear that they are professional seafarers. So normally, the authority will not specifically request to see any other proof. But if they do, there is, for example, a specific case in Mallorca. If they don't have a Siemens book, they like to see a letter of employment or a contract to prove that they are effectively employed as seafarer, and that's sufficient for them. So if you don't have a Siemens book, don't get worried. It's still possible to obviously obtain a stamp of entry or exit. Obviously, again, a crew list where they're showing that you are employed, permanently employed on a yacht. And travel details, again, that will apply if you get a stamp of entry for your further departure to the UK, then they may ask a copy of that flight. that was for the stamping in and out in Spain specifically. And then obviously again I was asked to give little travel advice. We covered already the topic previously, but just as a summary, I don't know if it's possible to go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's actually very, very simple. It's very simple. What we mentioned before. In Spain, crew members are exempt, but most of the time, the officer that is checking you in on a plane, or the airline have specific rules now applying to their own aircraft. And to mention some, whaling specifically, they don't accept crew member or in general passenger. They don't have a negative PCR when they're checking in. So it's very important that you do take that test. It makes things a lot easier for everyone. We suggest obviously to contact us when you are about to travel. Very promptly, within a couple of hours, we can issue the travel letters. Why we issue the travel letters in Spanish and in English? Because again, sometimes the issue that I find that even if the Spanish legislation protect and cover the seafarer, most of the official checking, they are not fully aware of the legislation in place in the country. So with the letters, we're basically giving an extra, very clear, prompt information to which regulation they should refer to, and we actually send copy of that legislation in Spanish and in English. So it's really immediate for them to confirm that the exemption is in place. And yeah, and that's it for you.
Thank you so much, Antonella. I'm just looking at our time, and we're officially moving on to the next slot. But that was really a great, really thorough information. And I'm sure as we come to the end of the webinar, we'll have a few more questions where we can bounce back to you and you can clarify a few things. So yeah, just to hand over to Richard Falk from the RYA now to talk about certification. Again, I know this is a very big sort of worry for a lot of crew who have obtained UK certification and how that holds out in the EU. Obviously, a lot of crew work on boats in the EU. So yeah, Richard, could you just clarify to us how Brexit has affected the certification?
Thanks very much, Stacey. So the short answer is that the only concerns we've had so far expressed to us from any EU nation has come from Spain. Very topical at the moment. There are no other nations that we've been made aware of yet where there are problems. That said, that doesn't mean that won't occur. But certainly at this stage, the only ones where we've seen issues have been Spain, and that really is emanating from a document that was released on the 28th of December and was only made available to us last week. The Spanish government haven't actually informed us formally, or the UK government, what their position is, nor has any other EU member state in terms of maritime qualifications. So what I can do is run through some of these specific questions that have been asked. First one being, how has Brexit affected acceptance of UK maritime certificates and qualifications? And attached to that really is, are RYA certificates still valid? To the best of our knowledge, in the bulk of the EU, they haven't been affected. And RYA certificates that were accepted at this stage still are. That's been a movable feast across EU countries for many years. And so what I will do is I'll touch on Spain in particular now. So summing up, in Spain, it would appear from what we understand that vessels under 14 meters are affected, vessels over 14 meters are not. which will be great news, obviously, to the super yacht fraternity. What does that mean? Vessels under 14 meters, I know that are UK flagged, are no longer able to apply for and receive a permit to operate commercially in Spain. Similarly, attached to that, holders of UK certificates of competence, RWA certificates of competence, can no longer operate on vessels under 14 meters, regardless of what flag they're under, as we understand it. Over 14 meters, there has been no mention. So our take from that is that in the yachting world, the things are unaffected. The other thing of interest, and it is a question that's been asked with the pre-questions, is within the world of ICC. So nothing really to do with the professional yachting world, but certainly for charters within within yachting, those skippering their own vessels. The question's been asked as to whether ICCs issued from the UK are still valid. With the exception of Spain, they are. However, in Spain, it is clear that an ICC issued by the UK is still valid on a UK flagged vessel, but is not valid on a Spanish flagged vessel, nor on a vessel of any other EU member state. Now, we have no explanation from the Spanish as to why they've taken this approach, but they have, and they are legally entitled to, as we understand it. We are in the process of addressing this through diplomatic channels, but what the outcome of that will be, I can't say at this stage. It's appropriate to highlight that Spain hasn't adopted UNECE Resolution 40, and therefore are not obliged to follow any of the conventions relating to the ICC, whereas most other European member nations have adopted Resolution 40, and so we don't anticipate any further problems with ICCs elsewhere in the EU. The question's been asked about what should crew do if they're unsure about the validity of their RWA qualifications and certificates in individual EU states, and the short answer is that you need to address that question to the individual maritime authorities in those countries, because they haven't provided us with any information, and on that basis we are under the assumption that they are valid in other countries, but we're not yet clear on whether that is fact or not. Clearly, where there, and the questions just come up in the chat, so I'll address it now. Clearly, a question that hasn't yet been answered by the Spanish is where that leaves crew operating tenders of large yachts, so where the tender is under 14 meters. And again, that's not been addressed in the Spanish document. Historically, tenders that are clearly marked as tenders and clearly identifiable as tenders have fallen under the yacht's operation. But again, that's a question that can only be answered by the Spanish authorities in the relevant port. So it's one that would need to be addressed to them directly. But I've not seen anything yet that indicates that they wouldn't accept a UK qualification for tender operation where that vessel is very clearly identified as a tender. Another question that's been asked is, will RWA instructors and examiners certificates be valid, and will they be able to work in EU-based schools on a freelance basis? So the instructor qualifications are valid for instructing RWA courses. Examiners qualifications are valid for examining yacht masters under exam conditions. In EU countries that have not stated otherwise, to the best of our knowledge, that can carry on. Clearly in Spain, that is not the case. And the only way that could happen is if they were working under the supervision of someone who was legally able to be in command of that vessel. The question, obviously, of their immigration status is another question altogether, and that would be those working on a freelance basis would be subject to any immigration laws that they would otherwise be subject to. Can they instruct as a tourist? No, they can't. The question over examiners is a slightly different one, in that examiners are working for the RWA, not for the school. So an examiner traveling is effectively traveling on business and is engaged directly by the UK and is being paid by a UK-based company, effectively operating on business as an independent observer to an individual. So our position as far as the EU is concerned at this stage remains unchanged for examiners. And the final question that I've been asked is a question over whether an RWA school operating in Gibraltar could take its vessel from Gibraltar, where the crew have been signed on in Gibraltar, and continue training by sailing into Spanish waters and then back out and back to Gibraltar, where the crew would be signed off or disembark. And my understanding is that they could. However, again, I would recommend that that was clarified with the local Spanish authorities in those ports that were on that regular route. So the short answer is that very little has come out of the EU. In fact, nothing has come out of the EU in terms of what qualifications are and aren't accepted, with the single exception of Spain. And the information that we've got is that which I've just explained. The good news is, from a yachting viewpoint, and when I say yachting, I'm talking large yachts, your sector, is that at this stage, things appear to be, from a qualification viewpoint, unchanged, other than the question mark over tenders within Spanish waters. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. I think, yeah, obviously a lot of details in there. I think we've received, I can see a few questions coming through about Spain and the different acceptance of certification from Spain, as you mentioned. So I think that's, you know, obviously all really interesting to hear, and thank you very much. Obviously, I think one thing just to reiterate is, obviously crew just need to be aware about how the situation will unfold. Because as Richard said, you know, individual EU states have, you know, the legal right to decide whether they accept or they don't accept certification. So it's important that crew keep up to date with the evolution of the situation as we go on from here. So we've obviously officially run through all our panelists now. We've received a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm going to start running through these questions now. I just wanted to say firstly that obviously a lot of the topics have been covered by our panelists, but I think it's better that we run through these questions and answer the questions specifically, because I think it will help clarify the information to everyone who's watching. So just sort of, I'm going to start with the more broader questions that affect more people, and then we can whittle down into more individual questions. So I think we've seen this question come up a lot, and I think a lot of people are confused about if UK crew were on board before the 31st of December, so before Brexit, they were on board, and we're assuming obviously on board in the EU, can they be stamped in? And some of this person says, but if they travel after the 31st of the 3rd, do they need to be stamped in and then obviously stamped out? So I don't know, there might be different takes on this in France and Monaco, and then Spain as well. So maybe Mark, do you want to start first, and then Antonella, yes. I'll get you to
yeah, so in general, we can talk about those not having stamped in, just like Antonella did for Spain, saying that they are in transit. So the general rule is, also for other nationals, not subject to visa, but subject to the 90 days. When they arrive by boat, they do not get stamped in because they're set to be in transit. and no stamp is put in the passport. However, we have this discrepancy with the UK nationals because we have a lot of UK nationals living in France, down south of France, and therefore, of course, immigration need to sort out who's on a crew list and who is just a regular UK nationals living in France, subject to the 90 days, and who cannot be stamped out. That's why local immigration here say that, well, you should be stamped out before you've used your 90 days, and we count them as starting from the 1st of January. Of course, what about those having arrived by boat after 1st of January? They're said to be in transit. Yes, that's why I say, do speak to your local agent. We can, if you lack the stamp, we can speak to immigration and we can handle your situation. I don't say that everybody has to do it, but if you want to avoid problems, try to get stamped out. And then when you re-travel, get stamped in again before going home. But of course, it can happen that you don't have the stamp for X, Y reason. And yes, we can speak to immigration. I saw there was another one asking as well for what about the flag state? Yes, Maltese flag ships can get stamped out. It's not because you have a Maltese flag that you're said to be out of Schengen or cannot be stamped out of Schengen because it's a Schengen country flag ship. No, any flag ship or any flag state can be stamped out.
Okay, so I think that was another key question that came up was, if you are a UK crew member, say in France, but you're working on a Maltese, so an EU registered flag boat, can you still be stamped out if obviously the boat is, it's an EU registered boat? So the logic would say that, you know, why get stamped out the EU if the boat is technically an EU boat? But the answer to that, Mark, is yes, you can get stamped out.
Yeah,
okay.
you have to see at the crew member and that nationality. And you have a profession saying that you're a seafarer and that's why you get stamped out. It's not because of the flag state of the boat.
Okay, and Antonella, is that the same for Spain? How are the Spanish authorities dealing with those situations?
Yeah, as we mentioned before, the only very important difference is that in Spain, it's 100% already confirmed that it's not automatic, that from January 1st, you are counting your 90 days. It's not like that at all. For the simple example that Mark mentioned, that a yacht could be coming from the Caribbean now in transit today, and the crew member, there was a British crew member on board the yacht coming into Europe, doesn't have a stamp of entry. So why it should be penalized, you see what I mean, from January 1st when he was not in Europe? So here the position is very black and white, very straight. Unless you don't have a stamp of entry, your days are not counting. So again, no panic for crew members that have no stamp out, let's say, do not stamp out, because if you don't have a stamp of entry, you cannot receive that stamp out and you're officially not in the EU.
Okay.
So,
I mean, one thing, I mean, should we advise crew, Antonella, who are in Spain to just contact local yacht agents? Because it's obviously, it's better to get your situation clarified and know when you will need
case by case, case by case, absolutely. There is a lot of different scenario, a lot of different personal situation, you know. Crew member, I don't know, that was in Europe, that drove the car from France and joined the boat because it was on holiday. It was so many different specific cases that it's best to contact us. They can email us. The best email address for Spain, it's Spain@BWA Yachting. We have different offices all around Spain, so we can then divert it. If we can answer directly, obviously we'll be the answering straight away. If not, we can put you in touch with the local office, either Palma, Mallorca, Tarragona, Villanova, whatever. But mainly Spain is the best address for us.
Perfect. So I think that answers the question. And I'm just reading, there's another question that came in, but I feel like this has been answered, but I'm just going to reread it. How do we deal with UK crew already on board before the 1st of January? We've been told that immigration considers these crew to already be stamped out. But the concern is when they go to stamp in, if they resign or finish their rotation, there will be no record of where they came from.
Well, that's not correct, because when you are a crew member, the first thing that you obviously, well, if you have a Siemens book, you have a stamp on the Siemens book confirming your status, that you are employed on the vessel for this day to this date. You have a crew list as well. You have records. That's something that can be proven anytime. And just to clarify, then, so if you are a crew member, there are that have been already on board, right? You are in Europe, you are on board. Let's picture a real case scenario in Barcelona. We have a lot of crew now in Barcelona. They've been here for 3-4 months already, British crew. We're not stamping them in. We only be stamping, out, because we can't. When they will leave, we will stamp them in entry. Yeah, and then they will receive a stamp of exit when they leave and they depart at the airport. And that situation will be absolutely legal, and they will have no issue whatsoever.
At any point when they leave the boat, they should be stamped in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When you leave, so the moment you are, as you correctly mentioned before, just to not repeat, but maybe reinforce the concept. As long as you are on board the vessel, you are under the flag state. You're not officially in Spanish territory. Obviously, you are not. Imprisoned on a boat. You have an allowance within, for example, Mallorca is within the whole island of Mallorca. You have freedom to go ashore, no problem. In Barcelona, same. It's technically 10 kilometers radius from the vessel position, but there is allowance for the whole city of Barcelona, to give you an example. But the moment you want to leave the city, you cannot. So to do so, you need to get a stamp of entry to officially enter.
Yes, so that definitely covers a lot of questions we received about, obviously, if you stamped out, but you're on the boat, but it's in the port.
Yeah.
What are your allowances in terms of leaving? I mean, if you want to just go to the bar opposite the boat, you know, that type of thing. But yeah, it does sound like, obviously, crew need to be aware, once they're stamped out, they are stamped out, and there will be restrictions on how far they can move from that boat.
Yeah.
One really important question that I want to cover, because I think the webinar, we've done a really great job of covering the black and white scenario of those crew who are working on boats or who are maybe traveling to go to boats. Obviously, we're in between seasons now in the Mediterranean, where we're officially in the winter season. We're going to be coming up to the summer season. We have a lot of crew who travel to Mediterranean ports to look for work. So they either travel here, they're applying online, or they do dock walking. You know, in terms of the immigration status of these people, my sort of gut reaction is crew who have not got a job on a boat and are here to look for work. We've been told by one of our captains and council members, he's consulted an immigration lawyer, that you are technically on the fringe of the law if you are actively, you're out there with your CV on dock walking and saying you're looking for work, but you're technically in the EU on a tourist status. So obviously, you know, I've got South African friends who've come here on tourist visas who've been able to obtain work, but I think it's probably worth saying that, you know, now that British crew obviously are not illegally allowed to work within the EU, it's important for them to know that they sort of, that is technically not so much allowed.
Well, I think we have to look at the two different sides of their status, because now you pull out the South Africans are subject to visa. It's a little bit different. It's been going on for years, of course. We've seen dock walking of South Africans for many years, and yes, it is forbidden to arrive in EU Schengen on a tourist visa and go look for a job. However, with the UK nationals, they will not be subject to visa, so you cannot say that they're here for a tourist reason on a tourist visa. And who says when are they looking for a job, when they're just walking around the port? So how many South Africans have we seen caught looking for a job? Not many. I don't know any. So I wouldn't feel guilty going dock walking as a UK national, that's for sure. But of course, yes, legally seen, no, they can't come look for a job. They must have a job prior to arriving in Schengen.
Thank you for this clarification, Mark, and for your honesty. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I think that looking for work is a unique scenario from a legality point of view, but then also immigration point of view. You know, a lot of crew are, we did receive a question, and this is why I mentioned it. Someone said that they're currently in Spain. They were in Spain before the 31st of December, so before Brexit. They're waiting to start a job in March on a boat, but they're currently not working, so they're obviously not on the crew list. So they said essentially they should consider themselves tourists, and that they are bound by the 90-day rule until they start their work.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly correct. Because I think obviously this is important to clarify because it's new for British citizens, but as been mentioned before, Kiwi, Australian, USS crew member, they all now follow under the same scheme as the British. So it's not new for us to face this kind of situation, meaning that they don't require a visa to be in Europe. They have 90 days allowance, so they will follow under the tourist allowance. So they're not breaching any law as long as they don't stay more than 90 days, which I believe it's obviously cutting very fine because it's starting on 31st of March. But what I would say is that immediately, as soon as he's joining the vessel, to be stamped out. So with a contract, maybe you can reach out to us. I don't know exactly in which location is the crew member, but you can reach out to the agent, and then with the certificate registry, with the crew list where he's showing that he's on board, he can be stamped out to stop his time just before his 90 days run.
I'm just looking at the time now. We've got 5 minutes left before our official cutoff, but we will probably run over by 5 minutes just to wrap up all these questions because we've got so many questions. I'm just going to throw a question at Richard, a few ROI questions, just in case anybody's waiting to hear on those. Richard, someone said, are you saying that RYA/MCA certificates of competency commercially endorsed are no longer valid in Spain?
What I'm saying is that the Spanish authorities have stated that vessels under 14 meters that are either UK flagged or Spanish flagged cannot be skippered by people with RYA, MCA yachtmaster certificates of competence. We have no answer yet as to whether or not that includes MCA Master 200-ton tickets, because the Spanish, to the best of my knowledge, have not stated whether they are recognizing those, despite them being STCW qualifications. On vessels over 14 meters, we've had nothing from the Spanish authorities indicating anything one way or another.
Okay. Perfect. And I think that covers the other question that we received was, does the restriction on operation of vessels under 14 meters cover tenders to larger vessels?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I don't know, although international convention has always been that where the vessel is clearly marked and clearly identifiable as a tender to a larger vessel, they have accepted the qualifications relevant to that vessel. But that is something that I would be, if I was master of the yacht, I would be clarifying that with the local authorities in advance of my arrival.
Perfect, thank you. And then one final question for you is, do you have any recommendation for how to obtain appropriate Spanish certification? I hold an MCA 200. I don't know if you know the full details of that off the top of your head, but I thought I'd ask it.
No, anything relating to any individual flag state, unfortunately, it would be necessary to speak directly to the authorities, the maritime authorities in that country, to get the accurate information. But it would be worthwhile speaking to the MCA directly and asking whether they are aware yet of whether or not the Spanish are accepting the MCA Master 200 ton. I have asked the question, I just haven't had the answer back yet. They clearly are inundated not only with the Brexit issue, but also with the coronavirus situation and seafarers stuck at sea on vessels. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and then I'm just going to throw two more questions at Mark and Antonella. So I'm sort of summarizing a lot of questions that we received, but it's the same sort of thing that's being asked. The one question is for UK citizens who have got an EU residence. So say there's a UK yacht crew member, he's got an apartment in the south of France. He wants to obviously travel to Spain. How is that? Is he going to be treated immigration-wise as an EU resident and therefore doesn't need to be stamped in and out?
Depending on if he has the carte de séjour, so the residence permit. Okay. Those having obtained a residence permit can travel in Schengen. Now, hang on, there is a mention in some of those cards, which means that they're only valid for one country. Some has other mentions, which means they can't use them either for Schengen. But in general, a residence permit is valid for the EU, which means EU free travel Schengen. So yes, they do not need to get stamped in and out when they have the residence permit, and yes, they can travel within Schengen.
Yeah, same for Spain. Absolutely.
So people can't just assume because they've got a copy of their lease that says they're renting a flat, that means that they're a resident.
No.
They actually have to get the legal residence status.
You are a long-term visitor in maybe, and therefore yes, you come here, but you're still under the 90 days rule. Those wishing to go beyond the 90 days can ask for a D visa, a long-term visa, which means that they are allowed to stay for more than the 90 days. Those kinds of visa must be obtained for the first year, or for the D visa, in their home country. So if it's for France, saying they want to stay in France for a long time over the 90 days, then they should ask through the French embassy in the UK for a D visa. End of the year, so it's valid for 1 year, they can renew it. The renewal is done in France at the prefecture closest to where you have put your address. We can even put the address in our one of our offices, whether it's in Corsica or on the mainland, and then do it at the prefecture close to that one. It allows them, of course, to in the end obtain a carte de séjour, so a residence permit. Okay. Hang on, maybe you should think of doing that before doing so. Think of does that then make me liable for Social Security in France? Are those two linked together?
So I think that's a really important point that I think we need to echo here, is that in addition to, I think the general rule that's been sort of put out there is if your boat stays in, say, French waters or in a French port for more than 6 months of the year, you need to inquire, because your salary may be subject to French tax laws if you are staying in that port for more than 6 months of the year. So yeah, I think tax is another thing just to sort of point out there. So one other question we had was, so I'm just looking here. So this one's something that really confused a lot of people, is if you're going to get stamped onto your boat, but it's only going to go from France to Italy. Obviously, you're not leaving the EU. That you can still get stamped out for that movement. So sorry, just to re-clarify, if you're a UK member, you are UK crew member, your boat's been moored here in France for the time being, but it's going to move over to Italy next month. Can you get stamped out at the French port to move to Italy?
The stamps, whether it's in or out, are done closer to immigration to where the ship is based.
But so, even though the travel of the boat is not out the EU, the crew member
doesn't matter.
Okay.
No, because the status. So basically, when a crew member is stamped out the country on board the vessel. So the whole time he's under the flag vessel, basically in a suspended status, if it makes sense. So it doesn't matter if then the yacht is sailing between, you know, other European port, is always out on board.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I think a lot of crew we've seen a lot of questions come through about that. I think the other question that crew have, but I don't think it's not the same rule, is if you are a resident in, or you've been staying in Spain in the winter and you get a job on board a boat that your job starts in Italy and you need to fly from Spain to Italy, you still need to be within your 90 days to fly from Spain to Italy to then start your job, and then you can get stamped out at the port. Does that make sense, Antonella?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well, if it's within the 90 days, it's not a problem. So when he joined in the vessel, he needs to be stamped in to do any movement within the EU. So he needs to have received a stamp of entry to be able to travel. And once he's joined the new yacht, then we can stamp him out. Yes. So his time stops. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. So
one thing, also sorry to interrupt, one thing that obviously been mentioned very briefly at the beginning, but so that is clear for everybody. So it's 90 days over 180 days. So it'll reset every 6 months, if it makes sense. Yeah, that's really important because it's 90 over 180.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for everyone, it doesn't matter if your vessel is going to go between EU states, you can still get stamped out to be on that vessel. And it doesn't matter what the flag of that vessel is. So if it is an EU flagged vessel, say a French flagged vessel or Italian flagged vessel, you can still get stamped out the EU. That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. If I can say only one thing about Spain, we go in a completely different, field there, because if you're working on a Spanish flag vessel, it means that you're working in Spain officially. So you need to have a working permit. It's a little bit more complex.
Same thing for France. On French vessel, for flag vessel, yes, definitely.
Okay, I think that clarifies the question, but I think I would urge crew who have very unique questions like this, please contact either Antonella BWA Yachting or Mark at Catalano Shipping. I'm sure you guys would be happy to answer any questions on that.
Yeah.
Let's bring them on.
We've obviously run over our time here, and I'm really sorry to anyone whose question we haven't been able to answer specifically. I'm going to try and take a record of all the questions, and we will be sending out a guideline document via our website and via social media on Brexit and all the regulations. So anyone who's missed the webinar today or who hasn't had their question answered, we will try and get information out there that answers your question. For our panelists, could I ask you, do you want to sort of sign off with any sort of one last final thought or word? Obviously we don't have a lot of time, so if you can sort of keep it short and sweet. Mark, I'll just hand over to you quickly. Is there anything final you want to say?
And thanks for listening in. That's all. I guess all the questions are going to come, and you're welcome just to send them on later on, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, no, for me too. Thank you so much for inviting us, and we're super happy to support and help anybody, because I know there is always a bit of confusion to start with. So we're here for you guys.
Don't panic, yes. Don't panic.
Don't panic.
And Richard, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just one from me, other than to say thank you for having me on, and to everyone that's listened. But I think the key message is, where there are questions around qualifications relating to a country in which you're going to be operating, or a vessel under whose flag you're going to be operating, then unfortunately it is those individual countries and the maritime authorities from those countries that are the only ones that can answer your questions categorically at the moment, because we're operating on a whole new playing field. The positive news is, at the moment, it appears to only be Spain that's taken quite a hard line with this situation, and only on vessels under 14 meters. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll have the final words. Thank you very much, Antonella. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mark, for your expertise and for your time. Stacey, thank you for having put together this webinar so quickly and with esteemed experts. And I'd like to apologize to all the participants who could not join in. We had 300 registered, only about 105 managed to make it. I'm going to take that one up with the Zoom probably, but in any case, it was a pleasure to be able to do this webinar. Brexit, we've not heard the end of it. We'll probably talk about all this again, but until next time, thank you very much to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.